Okay, so let's keep talking about more food. So again, think about breakfast, lunch, or dinner. If you had breakfast, lunch, or dinner, odds are you were eating some form of carbohydrate. And you need to because it provides energy. It's a primary function. Most likely there was some amount or form of lipid in there. That's going to give you the necessary structural ingredients, the necessary components to create cell membranes, shock absorption, insulation, protection. It does also provide energy. Now, the third group of organic molecules or biomolecules or food is the protein group. So we're going to talk about proteins here. Proteins provide the greatest variety of functions for the human body. So huge things, huge functions and features from proteins. So let's take a look at the first one, our metabolic rate. Enzymes that regulate metabolic pathways are proteins. They're protein structures. So without proteins, you can't make enzymes which control your metabolic rate. So things we want to think about when we're eating, trying to be healthy, etc. Support. Structural support. All right? So your hair, your ligaments, your cartilage, etc. This stuff called keratin is a major protein structure. So if you have bad hair, are you getting the right proteins? Are you getting the right essential amino acids into your diet to form good hair? Transportation. Now this isn't vehicular, but the movement of substances through the cell membrane. Okay, so things go in and out of your cell based upon proteins, depending upon the size of the structure. So when we get into our next unit and we talk about our next chapter and then unit, we'll talk about cells, we'll talk a lot about cell membranes. Molecules move into the cell and out of the cell, and a lot of times they're going through protein-based structures. So if you change the shape of the protein, you change the function. And that leads to some major problems. So we'll talk about a disease called cystic fibrosis. It's all due to a bad protein on your cell membrane. All right, defense system. Your immune system. What controls and regulates and protects your immunity, those are protein-based structures. So we got to make sure we're building these things and keeping our bodies safe and healthy. Regulation, the hormones that control homeostasis, those are protein-based functions or protein-based structures. So all these things are being done by proteins. So when you eat protein, you want to use it for metabolism, support, transportation, defense, regulation before you would ever consider using it for energy. Yes, proteins can give us energy. It gives us roughly the same amount of energy as a carbohydrate. 1 gram of protein equals 4 calories of energy. So you don't want to eat protein to say, oh, I need to fuel my body and give myself energy. I want it for all these other functions. Another major function, actually, let me slip it in above here. Movement. Muscle tissue. Muscle tissue is protein. It's protein-based structures. Without it, you don't move. The body doesn't function. Okay, so these are all critical functions of proteins. We want to go through all those functions before we would ever tap a protein for energy. All right, so now let's look at proteins. Proteins are made up of amino acids. That's going to be important to remember, these various amino acids. And in general, there are 20 standard amino acids that make up all the proteins out there. All right, the majority of life uses the same basic 20 amino acids to build their proteins. I don't care if you're a fish, a frog, an oak tree, or bread mold, or a person. You're working with the same basic 20 amino acids. They're basic building blocks. Think of them like Legos. And you can take these Legos, you can assemble them into different shapes and forms based upon which Legos you use and which pattern and which arrangement you put the Legos into. That's how life works. So we talked about hydrolysis, condensation. You eat a hamburger. There's protein there. That's the meat, the muscle tissue of the cow that you're eating, or the pork, or whatever it is, the muscle tissue that you're eating. That's getting broken down in your body into the individual amino acids. Those amino acids are then reassembled back into a different pattern based upon what your DNA tells it to do. So when we look at proteins, if we have this big pile of amino acids, think about a big tub of Legos, just this huge, massive, millions and millions of Legos or amino acids, your body is going to say, hey, I need to build something. I need to make hair. That's a protein. So I'm going to start with the simple, basic, primary level of protein structure here. And what I'm going to do is string together thousands of amino acids. Here, here, here. These are all amino acids. They're held together with a thing called a peptide bond. But you put together this big long string of amino acids, like a pearl necklace here. You attach a cap here and a cap there, and now you have the primary structure of a protein. That might be your hair cell. So now you get good hair. But if you're missing amino acids, you can't build that chain correctly. And that leads to some problems. So your hair doesn't grow right, and it's not full and healthy and luxurious. So look at your high-priced salon shampoos and hair products. They often have amino acids enhanced into them to try to say, oh, well, if you put this on your hair, the amino acids will make your hair better. It doesn't work that way. It's got to come internally. It's got to be built internally from your body. It doesn't get added on top of the hair cell. Sometimes, though, the body says, hey, we need to step it up. Let's go to the secondary level of protein structure. Now, what it's going to do is it's going to take the primary and it's going to then twist it and spin it and turn it and coil it and roll it into a different shape. Or maybe it takes several of the primaries, puts them next to each other, and then attaches them or links them together, right there, right there, right there, and forms this thing called a pleated sheet. Okay, so the secondary level of protein is created based upon a modification of the primary. So if you don't have the amino acids to build your primary, your secondaries aren't going to work very well either. Sometimes we get more complex. Let's step it up one more. Let's go to our third level protein structure, or we call it the tertiary. This is just a third level. Now we're getting three-dimensional. What we're doing is taking secondaries, and then we're going to take that secondary, and we're going to connect it to this secondary over here, and we're going to connect it to this secondary down here, and create this larger three-dimensional structure. Alright, here's hemoglobin. This is how you move oxygen through your body. This little iron molecule right here, that's where oxygen is going to bond. But that iron molecule has to be held in position by this tertiary structure of amino acids. We can put another oxygen here, one there, and if we're really super good and efficient, what we call supersaturated, we put a fourth oxygen there. Usually we don't get all four of those attached. but it requires tertiary level proteins to form this. One more way to step it up. Let's go to the most complex. This is the fourth level, or what we call a quaternary structure of protein. This I'm going to call the big mess. Alright, so the big mess is a combination of several of the tertiary. So you got a bunch of these shoved together to create that. Enzymes, hormones, insulin. There you go. Quaternary level structure. So if your body doesn't make these proteins the right way, the ultimate function of the protein is not there. So an important thing, I want to stick this in here. When we talk about proteins, form equals function. That is critical. The form or shape of the protein determines the function of the protein. So if you change the shape, you change you change the shape, you change the function of the protein. That's not always a good thing. All right, so consider big hair days, perms. This is due to changing the shape of your hair. Now, naturally, we all have a gene for the shape of our hair, straight, curly, wavy. But I can change the shape of your protein by doing a thing called denaturing. All right, so denaturing is changing the shape by altering the, and let's bold this, the pH or temperature. That's how you change the shape of the protein. You alter the pH or the temperature, and that is how you're going to change the shape of that protein. All right, so two key things to denature: temperature and pH. So here's your normal active protein. Here's its shape. Let's denature it. Oh, now it doesn't work, and it's not going to function correctly. Sometimes you can renature it and get it back to the original shape, but other times it may not renature, and now your protein doesn't function. That can create a major problem for us. If a protein is supposed to do, simplify it and call it job A, when you inactivate it, now it doesn't. If you can't reactivate it, job A doesn't function anymore. And if that is to carry oxygen in your body, that's a problem. If it's to move molecules through the cell membrane and it can't function, that's a problem. So I'm going to do it here again because I want to drill this into you guys. And I'm going to bold it and do it in red and make it obnoxious. But the shape, the form, the shape of a protein equals the function of the protein. Okay? So change it, alter it, and it's a very bad thing. Okay, so again, the idea is keeping our body in homeostasis maintains the ideal temperature and the ideal pH range so our proteins work. When we get a fever and the temperature goes up, proteins denature, things don't work correctly. We get sick and the chemistry of the body gets off and the pH shifts. Same problem. All right, so now the last thing we want to look at with proteins is where do we get it? There's plant and animal forms, and it doesn't matter which one you're tapping into. You just absolutely have to make sure you're getting all 20 essential amino acids. Now, AA for amino acids. Now, it doesn't matter, plant, animal. Usually you need a combination of both to get all 20, but as long as you're getting those 20, you're going to be able to build all of the proteins you need to build for ideal health. If you're missing some of those, if you're vegan and you're not supplementing and doing it correctly, you're going to have some health problems.